Hello and welcome to Greenbytes Wednesdays. Greenbytes Wednesdays is a podcast series where we facilitate critical conversations and scale consciousness when it comes to understanding the impact of our digital footprint across Nigeria's technology ecosystem. We hope that with this advanced knowledge, we can introduce you to some tools, trends, and best practices that can enhance your knowledge about digital sustainability. Are you curious about climate change? Are you a tech enthusiast or a climate entrepreneur? Come on board and learn on this episode as we get on with every conversation of the Greenbytes Explains the podcast series. This podcast is proudly brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, funded by the UK government via the Digital Access Program. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and I am glad to be your host. Welcome and
Hello and welcome to this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. It's such a pleasure to host this conversation today. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote, and it's indeed a pleasure to work with the team to bring you this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. If you haven't checked out other episodes that we've recorded, please feel free to check it out on every place you find podcasts, from YouTube to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud. Wherever it is you find your podcast, you definitely will find the Greenbytes Wednesday there. And Greenbytes Wednesday is a part of the Scale for Net Zero program. Scale here is Smart Climate Awareness Learning and Empowerment Program. And we're very excited to see that we can speak around the issues of digital ecosystem. We can speak around sustainability, energy, and we narrow all of these conversations here in Nigeria. On Greenbytes Wednesday, what we try to do is to have critical conversations and stir within you the consciousness to understand your own part when it comes to the digital ecosystem at large. What is the role that you play? What are some trends or tools that you need to be aware of? What can you do differently when it comes to your relationship with digital and sustainability issues? That's the focus of the conversations that we're having on this series of the podcast. Thank you once again for making out the time to be a part of this for learning, and I hope that you would also share with people in your network. When we talk about net zero or sustainability, it is very strange for many people. They really don't know what it means. And this was me maybe 10 years ago, fresh out of school. Yes, I was educated, if you call it that way, but there was also a lot of lingo around SDGs, sustainability, emissions, and it just did not make sense to me then. And I know that's the reality for many people out there today. So on this episode, we want to walk you through a citizen-driven path to achieving net zero emissions. And my guest today is Wole Hammond. I've known Wole for quite a while. It's probably 2 decades or now. But in the last 5-6 years, he's very actively been in the space. And from starting out with Susty Vibes, where he was volunteering at the time, and also a lot of grassroots mobilization, to taking photographs and being one of the leading people when it comes to how we tell our stories, our climate sustainability stories through the lens. And very recently, he's been working in the policy space on the continent. It's such a great privilege to have you on the podcast. Welcome, Wole.
Thank you so much, Shay. It's a pleasure to be here as well.
How are you doing today?
Very well, thank you.
Great. So, I don't know, where should we start from? Maybe let's sort of lay the background. When it comes to net zero, how would you introduce this to a layman?
All right. So I think the best way to contextualize things is firstly to help people understand the environment we live in and how the interactions between, do you know that when you have trees around you, it sort of helps your immediate environment to be much cooler compared to an exposed area without vegetation cover. So I think that gives us a point to sort of say, yes, trees are important, right? And we can then begin to now link it to more complex things like net zero, to say some of the activities we do, like burning our fuel wood, charcoal, using our generators, the fumes, and the exhausts that come out contribute to the emissions we have in the atmosphere. it might sound a bit complex, but I think just laying that foundation of how all these things build together makes a case to say, you've seen how in maybe your 5 to 10 years, just experiencing how the temperature has been, you might notice that the dry seasons are much warmer compared to what you experienced maybe 5 to 10 years ago. And some of the things driving this are the emissions we've talked about from our cars, our generators, and our various activities. Now, bringing it to net zero is trying to say, how do we then reduce these emissions that we contribute to the atmosphere? So what kind of action can we take to generally bring this down to a level that is compatible for the well-being of our planet?
Great.
I think that's my approach.
Yeah. And why is it important now? Why has it become more conversational these days? Or would you say it has been from, centuries before now? Or why is it topical now?
Okay, so I think the reason it's become a huge topic across the world is how we have now come to the realization that activities on this planet to sort of create the built environment, the things we need for everyday life, the things we even need in the studio requires a level of production. But the problem is, it's that it's gotten to a stage where it's now has harmful impact on the future of our planet. And now it's important that everybody is part of this conversation. I think like when conversations around the Rio Summit in sort of 92 started, not a lot of people were plugged into that. It was, okay, it's just for these nerdy environmental scientists and policy makers. Yeah. But now we're seeing more people look up to seeing the outcome of COP, seeing more people become very vocal, asking policymakers and presidents and head of state about what are you going to do about the climate and the environment. So I think the awareness that it involves everyone is what is driving this topic across the board.
Great. Thanks indeed, Wole. I'll make a very quick analogy here. I once heard someone say, think of all of us being in a balloon. It's a really small, maybe it's not practical, but think that we're in a balloon. And in this balloon, you pump in so much air and it's big enough, right? And we are all in this balloon, and you close this balloon, but you let a little space. And through that space, you pump in a lot of, gases from carbon to methane, and you just keep pumping it and pumping it and pumping it into that balloon, and you close it right back. How comfortable will you be there? I guess you'll be looking for a way to get out of that space. And that's exactly what it is. If we think of the world, our shared planet, the planet as one space that we all share, and we keep emitting from industrial to, household, across board, different forms of methane from the agri sector to waste sector to industries, to oil and gas. It tells you that we cannot continue that way. And it puts the lives of the 8 billion people out there at risk if we don't do something differently. And I just make that analogy to put in context what you had shared earlier in understanding or sort of introducing this concept of net zero. So the concept of net zero is like, how do we answer the question of still producing, but yet absorbing as much of these gases that we need to emit when we produce? And what are your initial sort of understanding around this concept of saying that we can still produce because we need to develop, we need to advance? There's a lot of tech innovations out there, and like you said, they rely on some sources of energy, and that means emissions. But then the flip side of it is that we also need to see that we can absorb more of this, isn't it?
Yep. So I think the realization that the current model of our economy, which is driven largely, by manufacturing, energy, transportation, is that we'll continue to emit. But firstly, we need to, how do we reduce this emission to a level that is bearable. And for the ones that are sort of like essential, how do we then compensate with actions to mitigate and sort of balance out the equation? And this is where the other side of the net zero conversation around how do we create more carbon sinks? How do we plant more trees? How do we use more renewable energy, which is greener compared to the current fossil-driven economy. So trying to think of ways to sort of increase these activities that will compensate for the sort of essential emissions that we still have due to travels, even in Nigeria due to our use of generators, right? So how do we balance this out and sort of make it and a balanced equation?
So what are some of these ways to achieve this equilibrium?
Yeah. So I think firstly, the first way is through energy. I think energy is one of the major drivers. And in a country in Nigeria where it's largely driven by gas, our energy production is largely based on our gas reserves. It means that in trying to sort of close down these gases, we need to create new alternatives, which is more solar power, more wind energy, more mini hydro systems that we can use to power. So Nigeria has a target for net zero by 2060.
That's right.
So that means that by 2060, we must sort of reduce our dependence on gas within this period. And I think Nigeria has labeled gas as a transition fuel within this period, so that we can then use that period to sort of build out a pipeline of solar systems, wind facilities, and other forms of renewable energy. And for us to then achieve that, it means would also be like closing down some of these gas facilities when we are sort of nearing 2060. Yeah. Also would be, for instance, it would be also reducing our current emissions from the forest and land use sectors. Nigeria really suffers from deforestation because, one, a lot of people still use wood-based sources, biomass, fuel, charcoal, just to make their cooking. So this means we are firstly depleted what would be our carbon sink reserve to sequester carbon. So that means we have to firstly protect the existing ones, and also sort of regenerate the depleted forest and land use sectors. And also, how do we sort of balance this out even with agriculture? Because as our population grows, we need to also increase food production, which means we need to clear more area. But how can we use concepts like agroecology to sort of balance out how we still keep to some extent the arable land, and complement both having our forest and vegetation cover with modern ways of doing agriculture. So these are some of the ways we think about operationalizing net zero in Nigeria.
Great. Wale, I know you are in the field. You've been in the field for a while, and it's very easy for us to get lost in this, technical terms. So I get it very clearly, and it is very relatable to me and maybe some of the people who have been in the space. But now let's bring it down to an average citizen out there, an average Nigeria, who, okay, he understands we need to do something differently. We need to act more sustainable, but he does not know that path to follow. So imagine you holding an average Nigerian out there by the hand and walking him through the path to say, hey, if we would achieve net zero, you as an individual, this is the path to follow. What will that path look like?
Thank you. In simple terms, yes. Okay, so I think for an average, and I think I want to sort of speak to the youth demographic, which is firstly an important one in Nigeria, and the largest because our country has a large youth population. And the first way to doing this, I think, is the aspect we talking about the educational bit of helping people see what can I realistically do as a person, because when we make this commitment at COP and other multilateral fora, it feels like, okay, that's the problem of the government or big corporations. But at the end of the day, people make up communities and societies, and this make up nations. So the first thing is firstly communicating the literacy bit to say, this is why we need to take action to create a more sustainable world in which everyone can live in. And the next stage is to sort of talk about the pathways, what sort of connects with you the most. So usually the key sectors we look at are energy, transport, agriculture, waste management. So for instance, let's start with waste management. We say in Nigeria that there's, to some extent, people don't really think so much about what happens to their waste, right?
Yeah.
People buy stuff from stores with plastic bags. I think on my way, I still saw someone sort of throwing it out of a moving vehicle. And these are the ways we need to start to say, firstly, this has environmental impact. And on our waterways, causes flooding. This affects our lives, our food, our properties as well, because flooding comes at in the health economic, and the health impacts. And some of this bags and waste find their ways to landfills, which they're just burnt, and that's one way we increase our emissions. So what is the action? What is the pathway for a person who wants to sort of make commitment and take sort of responsible action to improve this? Is that firstly is trying to take care of this at the source, to think about, okay, how do I better manage my waste? So for instance, with PET bottles, there's a clear pathway to recycling them. And one action people can take is to start by sort of separating their waste at the source, at their own household, to say, okay, I have a dedicated bag for plastic bottles for my soft drinks or table water, and I keep this. And there are recycling facilities that I can sort of take them to, which can also be sort of, I think it's called a buy-in, where you give them the bottle and they give you some sort of return, Chanjajati, there's Echo Bata, and then in Lagos you have Pel Recycling, Recyclers, Recycle Points. Yes, I know Echo Bata as an app that you can also use to, they can pick it up even from your, so that's the first way for someone who is like, okay, I want to start waste management. How do I become responsible with my own waste? How do I sort out the organic ones from the inorganic ones, especially the PET waters, where it's quite easy to recycle these days.
I don't want to sort of, I know you are still moving to the other sectors. You talked about energy, transport, building. We also have water sector. We have oil and gas. But just to dwell on this a little bit, in practical terms, how do you think an average Nigerian there is motivated to sort his or her waste in the first place? And if you think around what happens thereafter, it is this, truck that comes and lumps them all together. So what validates or sort of, says you're doing right when you sort your waste in Nigeria?
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So speaking in the Nigerian context, I think most times we say that a lot of things don't work and we lose track of the little things that can happen when we begin to take this incremental action. So, so let's still dwell on this waste thing. Firstly, we have a lot of sort of unsanctioned landfills around us. And I think one thing we can do as like active citizens is to continue to engage government to say, we have done our part to separate waste on our end. And these people who you've licensed to collect this waste are just, lumping it up somewhere and it's just being burnt. So if we play our part, can you also make sure this is properly disposed of, so that, for instance, the organic bits can go into process of making compost, and also generating energy through waste to energy centers.
Yeah.
On the sort of PET side, the recycling side, I think the incentives they are quite clear, because you can get something for the bottles you keep. So instead of just trashing your bottles, you can keep them for a month. You bag them well. You go to the collection center, and you cycle, and you get something in return. I don't think the motivation should be the incentive you're getting, but I think it's a good way to.
Well, it depends on who you're asking. For the average guy out there who is, not sure of what to eat at night, it could be a very strong motivation.
Yeah, and that could be as well. And also I think there are also programs I've seen, I can't remember the name of the organization, that allows sort of parents to sort of collect PET bottles and bring it to them, and they use it to pay for the kids' education in schools.
It's led by Alex. I'm trying to remember the name of his organization now. He calls it Bottle for Education Pro.
Yeah, I think that's in there. So we've also seen that. So that's also a really strong incentive for people to key into this. So I think when we think of it as I've played my part, I've encouraged others to do theirs, we can then also use it to sort of influence our policymakers to be more proactive in making sure that the process we've started as active citizens doesn't go back and we just find our waste and landfills again.
Great. So do you want to touch on these other sectors also? What's the citizens' part outside of the waste sector?
Yeah.
Can you touch on these other sectors very quickly?
Yep. I think another one is transportation. It's also an important factor. I think to some extent Nigeria is really car-centric because we don't have a lot of mass transit system that sort of can compensate for the population we need to move every day between work and business.
And our mass transit system, you're talking of train systems, buses,
mass buses. I can do that because that really helps when you have sort of lesser cars. Imagine maybe a bus that can carry 50 people. You need how many cars? You would need before in say traffic cars to go into. Yeah. So that's a lot instead of having a bus that can easily move that, so that reduces the emission that will come from this sector. So one thing I think we can start taking action is by looking at alternatives, firstly for shorter commutes. So instead of driving your car to the store, which is 5 minutes away, can you start by walking?
But it's convenient to drive.
It's convenient to drive. It's convenient to drive, but also looking at the flip side of where we are now seeing what's happening in Nigeria's economy, where subsidies sort of living at the petroleum sector, and we are now beginning to see sort of price parity, and I think I'll come to that in the energy sector. But the incentive is that I think for us we need to, again, the education bit of saying this is how our little actions contribute to the problem we face, and this is how your own little action can also begin to solve things. So why not get an e-bike as well, or a bicycle, which has more health benefit. I think something we've been advocating for as part of a group I belong to, which is the Abuja Global Shapers, is calling for people to, look at the health benefit that also comes with cycling and encouraging people to do more of this. So you can use your bicycle to run those little errands within your estate instead of just driving a short distance. So seeing the benefit that it's contributing to your well-being as a person, you can also use that time to sort of bond with people, because you're walking on the street, you can say hello to your neighbor, right? And that really helps the society at large. So if possible, something I've been telling my friends is, let's get bicycles. We can use the weekend to do this together, cycle around, but also like for shorter commutes, or where just going to see my neighbor who lives down the road, I can easily just cycle there.
And on the part of the government, there's also the part of infrastructure.
Yes.
Yeah. Hear that it's safe to cycle.
Yeah. So that's why I talked about the shorter commutes, which I think works in like residential areas. But how do we also make our cities more walkable and also create a cycling infrastructure? I think, guys, I'm noticing that a lot of walkways are also now being created. I think I noticed this around Mabushi, which is a good thing, is that we now need to sort of, if there's no infrastructure, people won't be excited to do these things, because you consider your safety as well, where people don't really care about pedestrians or cyclists. So how do you want to get them to key into this? So this is where the policy side of also engaging with government to create the needed infrastructure is very, very important.
Great. Quite exhaustive on the waste and transport sector. How about the other sectors? Is there any you want to touch on very quickly before we move on?
Yeah, I think we should look at the energy sector because it's very important. We've seen how people we complement because of our energy situation in the country with our generators. So can we also help people see pathways to having alternative sources of energy that they can use for their homes and businesses? Firstly, I think, for instance, government is trying to create incentives for this by removing, I think, VAT on some renewable energy, especially the solar value chain, removing on some equipment so that it can help people have, people can easily acquire them when they are VAT exempt. So I think more incentives like this can help people embrace the transition to more greener sources of energy. So if people want to ditch their generators for a rooftop solar system, and one thing I encourage people to do is to do this incrementally. A lot of people will think about the cost of setting it up up front, and because it's usually a one-time thing that you have to do, it feels like a huge cost. But when you look at the long term, it helps to understand that, okay, and also with subsidy grant for petroleum in Nigeria, people can do the cost comparison and see. I think also this solar thing, because it's become really globally competitive when it comes to pricing now. So people can do that, and you can start with beads, you can start with getting solar water heaters, and starting to move some of your appliances. It's an hybrid system between what we have through our distribution companies and then your solar system. And some people can completely take it off grid over time. So helping people see that you have a greener alternatives, the noise from generators is reduced, the
lesser emission, so the air quality of air is improved.
So we can encourage people to embrace that. And also, I think what comes with this, the solar system setup, especially, and I know a few people who do this, is it also gives them better access to monitoring their energy consumption. They are more proactive about, okay, what do I really use? Where are my peak hours? Where do I need to make the blend? Maybe I can switch up this appliance during this time. And I can also remotely monitor to say that, oh, I forgot to turn off this appliance, and with a click of a button. And I think this is where young people who are really tech savvy can plug into this to create more solutions. And we've seen really innovative companies come up in Nigeria trying to address this. Some are providing energy as a service through a pay-as-you-go system.
Sorry, forgive me for being rude. I have to jump in there because the second part of this conversation will then be what digital tools are there that can enable citizens to become, or to move towards being net zero, or become more sustainable in their lifestyle. But you've walked us through very clearly, and I thank you for that. In terms of waste, in terms of transport sector, in terms of energy sector, and these are three big sectors. One other sector that I'd have loved for you to reflect on will be on the energy sector, in the agri sector. We call it the agri, forestry and land use, and it's I think around 21% of emissions. Do you have any quick thoughts on how the average citizen can become more conscious in terms of agri-related emissions?
Yep, I think one quick thing is, firstly, and I think this is also defining Nigeria's nationally determined contributions, is firstly also giving people incentives to think of the things they can produce themselves. So if you have space, you could embrace gardening, not just as a leisure activity, but also something where you can produce something that is just quickly from farm to table, because you can easily plant tomatoes and other vegetables that won't take up space. And people now, this sort of, I think, vertical
hydroponics, vertical farming.
Vertical farming styles that can people can use to manage space, especially when space is a huge constraint. That is one part. And one thing that is also important in the agri sector is that we're now seeing a lot of climate smart practices, whereby, for instance, Nigeria is largely rain-fed when it comes to our food production. So we mostly produce during the wet season when we have rains. So how do we manage for the period where it's dry and we don't have rains in a large part of the country? This is where things like solar-powered irrigation systems can come in, and people can use that we can have all year food production, which usually affects the price of things during the dry season. But if we can see that balance and create more incentives for people to adopt more climate-friendly processes and practices, we can increase our food security as well.
Awesome. Thank you indeed. Up next, we'll walk us through some of these digital solutions that are out there to make it happen. Did you stop? Hello, it's Greenbytes Wednesday. Thanks for sticking through. Thanks for following the conversation. Wole Hammond and I have been speaking about citizen-driven path to achieving net zero emissions. And we sort of walk you through different aspects, from waste to agri sector, to energy sector, transport sector. How do our actions sort of build up to emissions, and what are the smart things that we can do? How can we do things differently? It's laid the foundation for, at the earlier part of the conversation, we also talked about what exactly is net zero, what's the fuss about sustainability, why is it important, why are we discussing about this right now? This second half of the conversation, we'll talk a little bit about the digital solutions, the innovations or trends, some tools that are out there that makes it easy for you as a Nigerian or as a citizen to take smarter choices. But I want to very quickly say that Greenbytes Wednesday is a part of the Scale for Net Zero project. And Scale is the Smart Climate Awareness Learning and Empowerment program, and we're really grateful to the UK government for resources to make it available, or to make this series available. We've had incredible resource persons, the best mind, if you ask me, talk about different issues and sort of have these very critical conversations that steers within you some consciousness in terms of your digital mindset or footprint, and also to introduce you or sort of give you like a cap, if a bird eye view of Nigeria's tech space and the intersections with sustainability. As we get on with this conversation on the citizens-driven pathway to achieving net zero emissions, Wole, I turn to you here. First, can you walk us through very briefly? I know we're out of time, but where does it become disproportionate, this impact on the rural and the urban communities, or the contributions from the rural and the urban communities when we talk around sustainability issues generally?
Yes, there's really a huge divide when it comes to the climate conversations between urban centers and rural settlements. And this is because a lot of the focus has usually been on urban settlements, the focus on trying to give them infrastructure, trying to provide opportunities for them to learn about climate issues. You would notice that usually they are more conversant with these topics, while the rural areas are usually marginalized. But we forget that they play a huge role, firstly, even with our food production, because most farmers are smallholder farmers who contribute a lot to food production. So this is an important group of people to consider when it comes to these conversations. And I think one thing we need to address is that the policy conversation has to include them. We come up with national adaptation plans and these things, which we just maybe engage at the sort of state level, national level, where we come up with these really good plans, if you ask me, but we don't really embed the nuance needed for people who are really affected by these things. So let's still dwell on agriculture because it's an important part for rural communities. How do we ensure that we are communicating those strategies we've highlighted in our NAPs to the people down there to say, okay, for your agriculture system, you need to sort of adopt more climate-friendly options. You need support when it comes to climate-smart agriculture, and just embracing adaptation strategies. A lot of conversations at that level has to be around adaptation rather than mitigation. Firstly, because they don't contribute a lot in that sense to emissions. So we need to really focus on helping them embrace more adaptation and resilience measures. So,
and by NAPS, you mean the National Adaptation Program plan, which is like the policy framework that guides how we adapt to climate change.
Yes. So one thing that is important is that these conversations really includes them. How do we bring these farmer associations to be part of talking about what kind of measures would work for them, what they've seen in their own experience, because they also have like local knowledge and things they've seen in their experience on, okay, how do we better manage crop production? What techniques can we use to increase our yield? So if we can create a framework that allows for their own input and knowledge to feed into some of these plans, I think it's important, and it helps the policy design more inclusive. The education bit is where, and I know really incredible grassroots organizations who are sort of taking this information, condensing it to, the bites that will be helpful for them to say, this is what you need to do. This is how you improve using agroecology. This is how you can use irrigation in your own local way to improve food production and better manage the risk that are associated with climate risk associated with the food system.
And maybe you should give credit to Sustivibe, which has also been making sustainability very vibey, if you put it as well.
Yes, very vibey, very relevant to young people. So to bridge this divide as well, I think we as young people in this space, we should continue to do more to ensure that we are amplifying the voices of these people, because they are speaking. It's just that maybe people, the policymakers, are not paying attention or listening. So we just make sure we leverage through social media, amplifying their voices to say, these are the issues we face: drought, desertification, deforestation, and helping them also scale whatever solutions they have to better adapt, especially nature-based solutions to adapt.
Exactly. I like that you talk about nature-based solution, because many times we also forget that our forefathers have adapted in ways like this, and with new innovations and trends, we can sort of incorporate it to this indigenous old-time knowledge, and as we move forward. So we don't dwell on that a lot or too much. Let's talk about some digital solutions. I know you tried to refer to it earlier, but can you walk us through some of the available tools and trends that the average citizen there can incorporate or sort of become more familiar with if they really want to work towards being sort of a net zero emitter, or if they just want to become more sustainable in their lifestyle?
Yeah. Thank you very much. I think the example I started with was in the energy space, how we've seen very innovative models in Nigeria around solar home systems and mini grids, where people can, through pay as you go, can subscribe to these things, and they just pay on installments over time, and also just subscribe to a token that they can use to either power their system for a month, 2 months, 3 months. So some of these solutions exist. We've seen companies like GVE Electric, who's have focused on like mini grids. So if, for instance, an estate sort of wants to come together to say, we want to use instead of having generators, who have a mini grid system that will power everyone's homes, so they can sort of create a mini grid system, and also think about financing options for them to sort of embrace the solutions. There are solar home system companies like BB Jump, who have different categories of solar home systems that people can subscribe to. They can either pay outrightly or through the pay as you go model.
Okay,
you can have that, and that provides you sort of guaranteed production for whatever setup you choose to, because they have varying options. There's some for basic lighting and charging small devices, and they have more advanced options that can actually power households. So these are some of the solutions we use.
How about smart homes and using smartphones to control your home? So
yes, there's a name I'm trying to recall, and I'm drawing a blank. And I hope I recall before the end of the program. But with this dashboard, you can use it to sort of monitor your energy usage, keep track of your appliances, turn off a few things remotely in case you forget. And also, there are also options that allow you use smart plugs that are they know that, okay, when this device is full, the plug can actually goes on like, okay. So there are also things like that. Another important solution I've seen is I'm drawing a blank on the other one. Yeah, okay. The other one I wanted to talk about is in the agri sector. Okay, where it's increasingly becoming important for sort of smallholder farmers to better manage climate risk, and it is through like micro insurance, where people can sign up using USSD or even mobile applications to subscribe to insurance, index insurance in this case, that allows them cater for in the case of loss, in the case of not having enough yield or experiencing extreme weather events. People like Polar Advisors, which is a climate insurance technology provider, can take up that risk and sort of pay out to farmers and helping them sort of manage that loss. So they've lost their yield, but they still have some income to cater for themselves and also prepare for the next season. I also
could you move to the transport sector? I know Nigeria is talking about CNG, but in other parts of the world there's like EVs already. So very quickly in the transport sector.
Yeah, in the transport sector, I think it's still a lot different in Nigeria, because I think I was doing some study and I've seen how in Ethiopia BYD vehicles are actually common. BYD is an electronic.
What do you mean by
BYD? It's a brand, an electric car provider.
Okay.
Which was really common. And I think what they've done is to sort of create incentives. They've now put some taxes on fuel cars, especially at the importation, which makes it a bit expensive to import, but that they remove some of the VAT on the electric cars. So a lot of drivers there are importing electric vehicles. So which I think it's something we can sort of see what's happening in other African countries, and how can we sort of adopt that to increase the uptake of electric vehicles.
I also think around tech, like, Bolt and Uber, and how they are providing services, and how we can maybe aggregate even a lot more, such that we can meet our transport needs without emitting so much.
Yes. I think one thing I noticed is in Addis Ababa recently was that most of the Uber drivers are electric vehicles actually, and they also help you to measure miles, and you can also give these miles to NGOs who are working around food waste reduction and child humanitarian services, which I think it's a cool innovation that incentivizes people to also think about vulnerable groups and how we can use technology to advance their own causes as well. And I think one thing I would also like to see in Nigeria, and it's something I've been thinking about, is how we better manage e-waste. And especially as young people, I think we often think about when we have maybe sports, electronics. These days, it's maybe easier or even convenient to buy a new one, and we just forget that we could actually either fix that and give that to people who might need them, especially schools. So seeing more NGOs plug into that to collect electronic from smartphones to computers that can be useful for groups that would need them, I think it's something that we need to see more of.
Thank you so much, Wole. Quite a lot that you've shared with us, and we have to call it a wrap. I'm really enjoying the conversation. I wish we could go for another 30 minutes, but here we have to draw the curtains. But let me ask you, if you are to give in very clear terms, like some bullet point recommendations to a citizen out there, what will these recommendations be? Just make them like pop, pop, pop.
Yeah. So I think the first thing is that we need to sort of make commitments, be ready to take responsible action. I think the first thing is commitment, making a commitment to say, okay, I want to do this. I have the capacity to do this. I can empower myself to do this. I think that's the first thing. The second thing is to looking at the things you can do and taking action. It starts from, say you want to have a reusable water bottle. Instead of having to buy bottled water whenever you move out, you have your own bottle you can go around with, which reduces the need to always buy a water bottle. Is something I do and I encourage people to do. So little actions, I think those little impactful actions can sort of build up a sort of better attitude towards sustainability. The third thing is, from the examples we've given, having an e-bike, embracing solar home systems, using more sort of smart appliances. I think it's us looking at, and because there are like options to finance them, like for instance, for solar home systems, you can get options that help you pay over a period on installments, looking at the financing options, and walking up to some of these providers who are very willing to tell you more about how you can get them. I think that's another thing. And I think the fourth point is, after taking this action, is like communicating it to others to say, you should do this, you should better. You go to your friend's house, they are disposing PET bottles, can tell them, hey, you can sign up to EcoVata, you can take this to trash mongers, and you get an incentive. So communicating that is important. And the fifth thing, as tech savvy people that young people are, is that we then leverage our social media to tell these stories, share these experiences, and also use it to sort of advocate and demand more from our policymakers to say, we are taking action as young people, and it's a social contract. You must keep the end of on your side as well. You must be able to do things you are responsible for. So, and I think that way we make a case for advocating for better policies and sane infrastructure to allow us be able to cycle from Jabi to Asokoro.
Absolutely. I'm looking forward to that in the near future. The first point you made was around the individual action, and you talked about how you use reusable bottles. I also dare say that I use reusable bags. And when I go shopping, I'm like, no, I don't need the plastic bags. And they're like, no, Oga, but we need to put it. I'm like, I don't need it. So you deserve it. And sometimes they want to double it. And I'm like, no. So I just made that connection. But in addition to the 5 points you made, Wole, I want to also add the sixth one, which is find a group, find an organization, like-minded people that can inspire you, that can motivate you to take more sustainable actions. And these are very clear paths. Thank you so much, Wole, for these insights, for these thoughts, and walking us through what it means for an average citizen out there to become more sustainable, to sort of put efforts together and see that we achieve net zero, hopefully by 2060, which is the ambition of the Nigerian government. And that's the size of this package of Greenbytes Wednesday. Thank you so much for listening, for staying through, for learning. I hope you share this with people in your network. I hope that you take into cognizance and into your daily lifestyle some of the things we've discussed on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. Many thanks indeed to the UK government for making this possible for us to bring this series of conversations. And Greenbytes Wednesday is a part of the Skill for Net Zero program. And Skill is Smart Climate Awareness Learning and Empowerment Program. Find the Greenbytes Wednesday podcast wherever it is you find podcasts, from YouTube to Spotify to Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, wherever it is you find podcasts, you definitely will find this there. On this note, I want to say thanks indeed to the UK government for making resources available for us to bring these conversations, to look out for the best minds and brightest of minds to sort of teach and to share with you knowledge when it comes to the digital intersections with sustainability, environment, energy, and to empower you to take action. That will be all for now. Thank you to the team, Ajibola, Ayo. Today we also have Mary and Mobolaji, and to the producer extraordinaire, wonderful, for coordinating all of this. We're really, really grateful. Till the next time, or till you find other episodes, continue to take action and know that every action counts. Bye for now.
Thank you very much for joining us on this episode of Greenbytes Wednesday. This podcast is brought to you by Area I under the Scale Initiative, thanks to funding from the UK government through the Digital Access Program. Have you learned something new? Share with your network, share with your friends, as I look forward to hosting you on yet another episode of Greenbytes Wednesday next week. Follow us on our social media platforms, check out our courses, test yourself, see how much you know, how much you're learning when it comes to digital and sustainability ecosystem in Nigeria. And I should remind you that as you balance your native digital ecosystem, also remember to stay committed to a shared and systematic plan. My name is Seyifunmi Adebote. Bye,